Designing new applications for automated DevOps here on Programming with Palermo.
You are programming with Palermo. You deliver software. You need to move fast, deliver quality, and run your software with confidence. Stay tuned for timeless solutions, simple methods, and topics that will propel you forward. And now your host, lifelong programmer, author, teacher, coach, Christian, and charismatic speaker, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome back to Programming with Palermo. I am Jeffrey Palermo, your host, and today we are going to be talking about designing new applications for automated DevOps. This is a very, very important practice that's part of the Clear Measure Way. It's actually part of the stability pillar in the Clear Measure Way, along with establishing quality. Now we're talking about achieving stability so that our development team can increase the speed and deliver software really, really quickly. And so when we're getting started with new applications or maybe a new microservice on an existing application, either way, we're sprouting up a new Git repository, a new Visual Studio solution. We want to deploy to production immediately, even before we have any feature code. We want to go to production on day one. That forces us to put together our automated DevOps environment for that new application. When I say application, I'm talking generically. We've got a new Git repository with a new Visual Studio solution. It's a new deployable application, even if it's a teeny tiny service behind the scenes that just listens for messages. Okay. And getting that in place in day one is going to really help us out. We're going to dive into all the details. We're going to look at our tried and true DevOps architecture poster. We're going to walk through all the different pieces of the structure, how it flows, hopefully help you eliminate perhaps some rookie mistakes so you can get down the road quickly and get to automated DevOps from day one. So let's get into it. All right, let's get into designing a new application for automated DevOps. Now here's the situation. Once a software project or new application gets going, the focus tends to be on features. Once code is being written but not deployed frequently, the team starts to slow down right from the get-go. Now, it might be tempting to think that we don't need DevOps automation just yet, but choosing not to put in a particular process is implicitly deciding to put in a manual process. The first bit of code you have will end up being manually built, manually tested, manually deployed, and manually monitored. And then the team is going to work on more code and more code. And then bug reports will start flowing in, and there will, quote, never be a good time to put in the DevOps automation. So my mission and the purpose of this video is to show you how simple and clear automated DevOps can be and how straightforward it is to put it in at the beginning when you don't yet have any code. And then you never have a point in time where you have to, quote, stop the bus or, quote, stop delivering features in order to catch up on technical infrastructure that would have been so much easier at the beginning. Because all along the way, automated DevOps causes you to design features just a bit differently. And if features are designed without DevOps automation, then you'll have to retrofit all of them later. Now, at the beginning of a new application, you need to think about 7 different areas of your DevOps environment: infrastructure, source control, your private build, your continuous integration builds, release management, bridging from build to actually releasing, the deployment part where you're actually deploying to environments, and then runtime observability where you're managing and you're monitoring your software in the various environments. Now, what you see on the screen is a DevOps architecture poster from Clear Measure. Lots of companies have used it, and it clearly lays out the architecture of your DevOps automation. You can request a high-resolution copy of this poster. Just go to clearmeasure.com for that. At high resolution, it's meant to be printed on a 2-foot by 3-foot poster board. You can take it to a print shop. But I'm gonna walk through the major pieces, and I'm just gonna jump into the first third, and let's go through the different areas and the structure and the flow of a DevOps environment.
Programming with Palermo is brought to you by Clear Measure, a software architecture company that empowers .NET teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their software with confidence in Azure. If your team has a project that's too important to be delayed or derailed, Clear Measure can help while keeping your team in the driver's seat and growing in capability. Click on clearmeasure.com for more information. If you are an architect or .NET engineer aspiring to become an architect, check out clearmeasure.com/careers. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, and I'm going to use my mouse to point, but we have our source control. Everything that belongs to the application needs to be stored in source control, including database schema scripts. Nothing that belongs to environments are stored in source control. Don't put any credentials in here, environment names, etc. Okay. Then you want, on top of your source control, on a local workstation, we're not even getting to servers or environments or build servers yet. We want to have our private build. The private build should run automated unit tests and component level integration tests on a local workstation before you even check in anything, okay? And you want that to be really fast. When you're starting out, if you have a build that the private build's running more than 10 minutes on a brand new application that really doesn't have any features in it, well, then you don't have anything, you don't have it configured just right, and we need to work on that, okay? Then from our private build, which operates on our Git source control, now we need to share it with our team members, okay? The private build answers the question for us, am I actually ready to commit something to source control and check it in? Or am I flat out broken? Is it a waste of everybody's time? Okay. Next, you have your continuous integration server infrastructure, whether it's Azure DevOps, whether it's TeamCity, whether it's any number, GitHub Actions, and that's going to be listening for changes to your Git repository and then kicking off your continuous integration build. Okay, and typically if you're using Azure DevOps, you're probably using Azure repos for source control, but you could be using GitHub or any of the others for Git source control, and that's perfectly fine. But it provides full auditability of what the user checks in and what code is there and what user has approved things going on. All right, including deployments, as we'll get to later. But let's get to the continuous integration build. This build answers the question, with all the code being shared by different members of the team, do we still have a stable piece of software that we can move forward with, or is something broken and do we need to stop the line and go back? Okay, so it answers that question. It runs all the steps in the private build. So you want your integration build to actually use the private build script because most of the steps are there, okay? It embeds a software version number into all of your .NET assemblies and any artifact that's there, JavaScript files, whatnot. It performs static code analysis, validation on the built assemblies and any type of code you have. It produces the release candidate packages, and Octopack is probably the best way to do that. It wraps NuPack and creates NuGet packages or zip files. And then you want to also include, here's an aside, you want to include your full system acceptance tests as a release candidate component so that they can be deployed. So your integration build runs all the steps in the private build plus static analysis and release candidate packaging, stamps the version number and the name of all the components, and then archives it. Okay, so let's move along from that into package management. This is Azure Artifacts or any number of things. You could have a file share if you're using something else, but you want a place where you're going to archive all of your deployable components for every release candidate. A release candidate is application name something version 2.5.6004. And then you add on to each one of those the deployable component. And it's perfectly fine for a release candidate to have 3, 4 more different components, because the web application would be a deployable piece of that release candidate. The database schema would be a deployable piece of that release candidate. And also the full system test suite, the acceptance test suite, would be a deployable component. So it would be a different package. So your release candidate is going to be a grouping of several NuGet packages, all that have the same name, the same version, and then the unique component name. Okay. And by the way, Azure Artifacts or Octopus Deploy's built-in NuGet server is great for archiving. Those are our favorites. And they use the standard nupkeg package format or NUPKG. You want to retain all of these release candidates so that they're always available for deployments. You don't want to have your deployments going back to source control and rebuilding new stuff. You want to be able to go and grab the packages that have already been built and then deploy them. Okay, moving on. If you're using, in this diagram, we're using Azure pipelines as an example to orchestrate on top of Octopus Deploy, but you want to log every step in your deployment process and whatnot. If you have multi-tenanted environments or if you're not using Azure pipelines, then you're not going to layer on pipelines on top of Octopus Deploy. But I'm going to go over the concepts here, regardless of the tooling. Okay, first of all, you want to have no fewer than 3 environments in your deployment pipeline. Why? Because there is no less than 3 unique environment types. Okay, this is the bare minimum. Most people are going to have 4. A lot of people are going to have more than that, but you need a production environment. Everybody has to have production. Some people have more than 1 production. That's perfectly fine. Backing up from that, you need an environment to do manual testing and manual verification. And then you're going to have more than 1 manual test environment depending on critical stakeholder. So if you have product management doing some UAT testing, guess what? You're probably gonna have a manual test environment for them. If you have some security or ops or auditing people that need a staging environment right before we go to production, guess what? That's another manual verification type environment, and they would have them. There's so many names for manual environments: UAT, staging, test, DIT, SIT, any number you make them up, but it's an environment where a human is going to check something about the software. Okay, you need at least 1. You can't get by without at least 1, and most people have 2 or more. Okay, backing up to the first one is the test automation environment. I like to call that the TDD environment to invoke the spirit of test-driven development. This is where your full system tests run. From the beginning of the application, you're going to have a small number of functional tests, but as you go, you're going to have capacity tests, performance tests, memory tests. You're going to have tests that run it all night and stress the heck out of your software and see if you can get it to crash. You're going to have penetration tests. You're going to amass all of these different types of automated tests for different purposes, and this is your test automation environment. Okay, this is the environment where no humans are allowed. It's dedicated for the development team to run automated tests. Okay, and so you need that, and we like to call it the TDD environment, and it is the first deployed environment. And a lot of teams have a lot of success actually deploying pre-release release candidates to the TDD environment from feature branches before they even submit their pull request, so that they know that they didn't break anything, because submitting a pull request knowing that something's broken is just a waste of everybody's time. Okay. All right. So that's the basics. Now, the steps on each one, there's a lot of steps that are the same. We're gonna do some database configuration on all of them, but on the TDD environment, we're gonna totally recreate the database from scratch, because we don't want any kind of data or any anomalies. We want a fresh database and all of our storage components from the get-go. We want to configure the server and the resources. We want to deploy the application and then run our full system acceptance tests. In the manual test environments, we want to ensure we have a backup of the test data in Azure Storage, Azure SQL, whatever storage components that we're using. We want to migrate the database schema, so if there's a new column or a change, we have that in effect. And then we want to call the automated health check endpoint. This is a really important concept. In all of these environments, when you deploy, you don't have Octopus Deploy go through all of its steps and then report that the application deployed successfully. You don't actually know that yet. And the server being up is not enough to say that the application deployment succeeded. We need to call into every deployed component of our application, and we need to ask it something. Basically, we're asking it, are you online and happy and healthy? Okay. For the SQL Server database, we might run a simple query to ask it just to make sure that we can access it. For a web application, we may call a simple HTTP endpoint that has a little bit of code behind it that calls out to its major dependencies, make sure that it can reach all of those before it reports back that it's happy and healthy. So for manual test environments and for production environments, we want the last step of our deployment process to call into all of those deployed components and verify that they're online, happy, and healthy. And then we know that the deployment actually succeeded, and then we can go to town. Now, the one piece that's not represented in this part of the architecture poster is telemetry. I've talked in other videos about runtime telemetry, the open telemetry standard, and I've actually had some guests on the Azure DevOps podcast about telemetry. And so that is super important, and that's ongoing. And then maintenance of your environments using runbooks is important. But that's beyond the scope of just getting new versions of software out. So I hope this helps. Designing new applications for automated DevOps, so important from day one. This is a critical importance to our stability pillar of the Clear Measure way. You don't want to start new applications on manual processes. You want to start them with automated DevOps from day one, and you want to get to deployment to across all of your environments to the environment that will be production even before you have the first feature written. When you lay out the skeleton of that Visual Studio solution structure, you want to deploy that nothing of a Visual Studio template all the way across your environments before you add the features. This is going to help get your production environment stable so that you don't have any production issues. It's operating like you want to. Then you can layer on automated test suites and design patterns and all the other Clear Measure way practices that allow you to establish quality right from the get-go. And those are going to create an environment where your development team is going to increase their speed to a point like you've never seen before. So hope this helps. God bless.
You've been watching Programming with Palermo, your primary place for highly productive programming protocols and practices. Remember, you have what it takes. You can do this. You are a programmer, formed by God Himself and called to this profession for a purpose. You can catch every episode at Palermo.network, as well as syndicated locations nationwide. We're so glad you tuned in. Until next time, may God bless you, and thanks for Programming with Palermo. Programming with Palermo has made a special arrangement with Marketplace Chaplains. Besides programming challenges, we all face issues in life where we need some help. If you'd like, you can call a chaplain confidentially. To speak with a gentleman, dial 512-923-8178. Or to speak with a lady, dial 512-619-6950. The show won't know you called, and everything is kept in strict secrecy. This is a free service, available if you or a friend need it.